Welcome back, and we're going to be talking about the Italian tempo terms. Now, the one that all of you, without exception, are familiar with is the term adagio. Adagio is not uncommon to see written into music. What you might not be aware of is what it actually means and where it falls within the spectrum of different tempos. So we're going to talk about what adagio actually means, which uh, always gets at least somewhat humorous reaction from the class when you say this in front of a room full of dancers, because there's some disagreement, some behind the scenes disagreement about what adagio means. But so these tempos, the plural of tempo being tempi, by the way, if we want to borrow that, these tempi are the order of them is fixed, but the range each individual one, because these are subjective, because they were created at a time before the digital means of timekeeping allowed things to be very, very precise, right? So we're talking the time when you had wind-up metronomes. I actually have one. Maybe I'll use it in the next video so you guys can see what one of those old school pendulum wind-up metronomes look like and how they operate, and you'll see why, exactly why you need to have a little bit of wiggle room with respect to how tempo is perceived, because these things weren't always terribly accurate either. So we're going to go from slow to fast, and we're going to listen to each one, and we're going to practice doing that conducting pattern that we did earlier. And just to get a sense, like a physical sense of how do you accelerate your hand or your arm to each of these beats. So if you remember, it's down, over, out, up, right? Those are our beats. So anything 64 beats per minute or slower is called largo or lento, long, large, right? So let's listen to 40 beats per minute. This is in like common store-bought metronomes. This is as slow as a metronome goes. I think this one goes a little slower, but let's listen to 40 beats per minute and let's see what it takes to conduct in time with this tempo. One, two, 2, 3, 4, and stop. So, lento, it's very easy, as you might imagine, to speed that up without some sort of reference point. And one of the things that you want to do as a performing artist that relies on timekeeping in some ways is to figure out ways to prevent yourself from speeding up, right? Speeding up in some ways is just as much a sign of an immature artist. I experience it on the musician side of it when I teach students, younger students. A lot of times people are worried about when you first learn something that you're behind. And so there's this sense of, well, until I really get it right, I'm going to always try and do it a little faster. But at a certain point, you pass your goal and you may not have registered that it's not that faster is better, it's that in time is better. And just most of the time at the beginning when you're learning something and it's new and the neural pathways haven't been fully worked out yet, that you're behind. And so putting it in time feels fast, right? Because the objective is one thing. How it feels to you is actually the determining factor in your ability to hold on to accurate tempos, accurate performances. Next one, and this is going to be the controversial one. Adagio, 68 to 76 beats per minute. What's that word mean? at ease. Adagio means at ease. So there's a couple ways to take this. And now, most of the time, I know that in dance, the adagio is some of the hardest material to pull off. You're basically trying to make the hardest things look easy. What does adagio actually? What does at ease have to do with this tempo marking? Well, if anybody here, like I have a heart rate monitor that I wear when I exercise, and if anybody else has ever done that, take your pulse now. I'm assuming you've been sitting still for a few minutes. Take your pulse now, and so I'm gonna give you an exact. I'll give you a 15-second gap where I want you to find your pulse, and I want you to count your pulses when I say go, and then we'll do some math and we'll figure out what everybody's resting heart rate is. So let's do it. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, stop. So that was about 20 seconds. So what I want you to do is multiply your number by 3. Right? My timing wasn't precise there, but you should get in the neighborhood. And if you want to do it again for yourself, time yourself for 20 seconds, and then whatever number of pulses you have, multiply it by 3, and you'll get your beats per minute. Chances are that most of your heart rates are going to be in that neighborhood. The exceptions are that, and especially for those of you who are more cardiovascularly trained, in good shape there, your resting heart rate is going to be even lower. All right. So the more athletic you are, the lower it is. Mine, I tend to have a decent amount of caffeine, so mine actually does sit. When I'm looking at it, it sits in the high 70s or low 80s. So this textbook thing of 68 to 76 at ease, resting heart rate is what it's referring to. And then you can also have the connotation of the music being carefree, right? Effortless. But let's listen to and conduct a few measures at 72, which is also about the tempo of bolero. When we listen to that, you can reference that 72 could be considered adagio. Here we go. 1, 2, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and stop, right? That one should have felt pretty darn easy, right? Assuming you know where the pattern is. It should feel like, I'm not speeding up, not slowing down, right in the pocket, right in the groove, right there. So the next tempo, Andante, 76 to 108. 76 to 108 beats per minute. Andante. So if you speak Italian or if you speak Spanish, the verb andar, what does that mean? It means to walk. So this is walking tempo. Obviously, and if you notice, whereas the Adagio range was 8 beats per minute, 68 to 76, Andante, the range is 32 beats per minute, from 76 all the way to 108, meaning it's acknowledging that people walk at different speeds, whether it's a geographic thing or what time of day or how much energy you have, personality type, that sort of thing. Are you a city walker? Or are you a tourist walker in the city? That sort of thing. So let's pick something right in the middle of that. Let's go for 92. And let's see. Here's a little experiment. Wherever you are right now, when we do this, I want you to walk around a little bit. And I want you to see if this feels like a natural walking tempo. I'm going to conduct. You can conduct or you can walk. right? Either one of those things, it'll be of value, putting some movement to this. Here we go. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, down. And stop. So, Andante, walking tempo, right? And if you think about these things, right, before we had mechanical devices that were ubiquitous that allowed us to keep time very precisely, you had to come up with things that were about as universal. And so this makes total sense. All right. Moderato is the next one. This one, if I'm to be honest and insert a brief editorial about this, Moderato is kind of a why bother, but I guess you have to have something that's in the middle tempo wise. It's 112 to 120 beats per minute. And 120 beats per minute is commonly referred to also as like marching tempo, like bum bum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum bum. Let's see how close I was. Hey, pretty good, right? So using the Stars and Stripes Forever by John Philip Sousa, the song that you would hear around the 4th of July in this country, is a way to get a moderato or upper moderato tempo. Again, these are subjective, but let's try that. Let's try conducting Stars and Stripes Forever. Here we go. Bum bum ba-dum bum 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 ready go bum ba-dum bum bum ba-dum bum ba-da-da-da-dum bum 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 ba-dum bum bum. Stop. Actually, that song is actually in 2, but we're going to pretend it was in 4. But that little trick I used, by the way, is a really handy trick. If you know what certain tempos are for certain songs, it helps you use those tempo markings as a way to ground yourself. I could say, oh, I'm going to try and memorize 120, but chances are I'm not going to have a really good, consistent way of doing that unless I attach it to something else. Next one, Allegro, right? This is a term you've heard, Allegro. And this means musicians, actually a lot of times musicians don't know what this one means, even if they do know what the others mean. They just think it means fast. Well, that's the tempo implication, and this is 120 to 170. They think it means fast, but it actually means happy or cheerful specifically. So this range, we got a range of 50 beats per minute. There's a lot of room for happiness at this point. So let's go in the middle. Let's go to 144. All right. So here, and again, it might be interesting for you to find a piece of music in each of these tempos and see if you can use them to kind of clock each tempo bracket, as it were. Here we go. Allegro. 1, 2, and 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're just doing four measures. Notice I'm betting that you have started to make your patterns smaller just naturally. You kind of have to. So just, in the other direction, expand out when you want to make things slower. It's just a way to connect your timekeeping with the size of your movement. And the last one, we have Vivace, lively, right? These you could potentially tie that to heart rate as well, although it's, we're getting, depending on your age and your health, it might be, getting into dangerous territory for some people. Hopefully not you, hopefully not anybody, but definitely, this shouldn't be dangerous just yet. But for some people, if we're using heart rate as a metronome, lively, right, is a slight ironic term. Just, the life of your heart is being fully engaged. Notice that there's some crossover here. This one 140 to 200. The previous one, 120 to 170, right? So that just goes to show you this is not, we're not trying to get overly scientific about this, but there's a little crossover. And especially when you get fast, like a 2 beat per minute difference is not as significant as when you are at 40 beats per minute, right? At 140, let's say you're at 200 beats per minute. 2 beats per minute is 1% of your tempo. And if you're at 50 beats per minute, 2 beats per minute is 4% your tempo. So it's 4 times as significant feeling in relationship to where you are in tempo. Let's listen to, let's do 180. And we're going to do our conducting. Make sure you're not going to knock anything over when you do this. Here's our tempo. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, go. And stop. Goes by quick. So much so that as you start getting into this speed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You see where 3 is, it's out. People end up turning this into 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, because it's a little easier to manage. That's the idea of feeling something in halftime as opposed to feeling something in 4. That's just a little by the way sort of thing. Moving on. There are some terms that mix in qualitative descriptions in with the tempo, like presto, instant. There's a certain kind of quickness of sound that's implied beyond just with the tempo. Things can be mixed up, like dolce moderato, like sweetly at a moderate tempo. So you'll see sometimes in scores, you'll see terms put together, and the terms can affect each other. They kind of melt together just a little bit. Some more terms to define. More terms, yay. Pulse is beats of equal weight, right? So if you're taking your own pulse, none of them, hopefully, are going to stand out. You're just going to feel equal events, let's call it. I was about to use the word impulses, but it kind of defines the word using the word, which is a no-no. Most of the time, when you hear someone walking down a hallway, you could reassign those footsteps as a pulse, as long as they're, they don't have a limp, or, they're wearing 2 different shoes or something like that. It's just a pulse, right? If you're, driving on a highway and you're crossing over, like, let's say it's a concrete road, and you get those seams in the road, boop, 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 as you go. That's another. It's a slower pulse, but it's a pulse. In modern music that has a drum set in it, very often the drummer's right hand is playing the pulse, or some version of it, some close cousin of the pulse. Now, we have to take those seemingly all equal pulses, and we have to put them into a hierarchy. So that's when we get into meter. So this is a group of reoccurring strong and weak pulses. Basically, if we're in 4/4 and we want to find what is the strongest or most important one to connect with, it's number 1. Here's the question. What is the next most important pulse within the meter of 4/4? Which beat? It would be beat 3, actually. It's the halfway point. If you remember a moment ago when I was doing the fast conducting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 3 is clocking, being able to clock where the halfway point is in timekeeping is a very valuable way to either prevent yourself from slowing down or prevent yourself from speeding up. It's just a calibrating mechanism, right? So if you ever find yourself having a difficulty maintaining tempo in music that's very slow, see if you can, in your mind, double the tempo and use that as mile markers. So rather than having 1 mile marker every mile, you get 1 mile marker. Well, on the road, it's every 10th of a mile. But in this case, in this musical example, it would be every half mile, every half beat. You're using that to orient yourself. The most common meters, right? This is a general thing for Western music. It is, if you go to certain parts, specifically certain parts of Central and Eastern Europe, this is not the case there. But for most of the West, the most common meters are 2, 3, 4, 6, 9, 12. Right? The first group, if you multiply all those numbers, 2, 3, 4, by 3, you get the next numbers, 6, 9, 12. Meaning those are what we call compound meters, where we can break the beat down further. Just like a compound movement is a movement that involves multiple muscle groups, for example. A compound meter involves multiple scales at which you could feel the beat. So if we're talking about, let's say, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. As I get faster, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2. It turns into 2. So that's what that means. That's why 2 and 6 are analogous to each other. 6 is just 2 groups of 3. And if you remember from your first year of music, the groupings of 2, groupings of 3, those are like the prime ways to group things. In general here, when we look at meters, all of these meters can be kind of broken down, reduced down to 2 and 3, right? So if we're in 2, 2 is in 2. If we're in 3, 3 is in 3. If we're in 4, that's kind of 2 2s. If we're in 6, that's 2 3s, right? If we're in 9, it's 3 3s. And if we're in 12, that's 6 3s, which is 2 6s, which is 2 3s, right? Each. So that was a lot of numbers. You might want to go back and watch that definition one more time. It did make sense, but I wouldn't blame you if you zoned out there for a second. So just go back and make sure that you just followed through that, so that you're still engaged with what I'm talking about here. Here is a metaphor to think about meter. Meter is the regular. Excuse me. My screen went screwy. Meter is the regular background against one. I'm going to start that one more time. Take 3. Meter is the regular background against which one perceives actual rhythm. So foreground, background versus foreground. Meter is background. Meter is the thing that's up here, removed slightly. I used that term earlier, is that meter is removed from the activity of the rhythm, right? Rhythm can coincide with meter and then go its own way. This interaction of foreground, which is rhythm, and background, which is meter, gives life to music, gives life and vitality to its music. That is an unattributed quote. I believe it's from the textbook that I used to use for this course before I decided this course doesn't need a textbook. So that is going to be all for us for this first pair of videos on the rhythmic topic. And just make sure that you're checking out the Moodle page so that you can find the other resources in there, the images and PDFs that accompany the material that we're talking here. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.